All right, we're going to get underway. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to the Lubar Center, Marquette University Law School, Eckstein Hall. I'm Mike Goucher, and this is On the Issues. This is our continuing series of conversations with news and policymakers, or people we like to say are doing interesting and important work in this region and beyond. Today, we are joined by Milwaukee's new police chief. He is Alfonso Morales. Won't you please give him a warm welcome to Marquette University Law School. So we want to accomplish a couple of different things today. First of all, some people in this room probably know Chief Morales pretty well. He is a lifelong Milwaukee resident, but some people may not know him so well. So we're going to spend a little time about his background and who he is and what he's done. And then we'll tackle some of the issues currently facing the Milwaukee Police Department. So let me begin, Chief. First of all, welcome to the law school, or welcome back. You were here not too long ago for a different event, and we appreciated that. But I wanted to begin by talking about your connection to Milwaukee, which is strong and deep. You grew up here, correct?
Absolutely, yes. I grew up here, born and raised. My parents immigrated here from Mexico. My dad first came up here in the mid-'50s. I always try to think I say it's unique, but I was over reading one of the history books. My son's at Marquette High School, and the Hispanics in Milwaukee, from what I learned, all came roughly around the mid-'50s. He sent for my mother and my older sisters, 5 of them who were born in Mexico, and we all migrated here. I was born in 1970.
You're one of 10 kids?
One of 10 kids, second youngest. What's interesting about that and where we grew up 2139 North 33rd Street. Beautiful house, I think German architect. That neighborhood was predominantly German back in the 60s. The reason why I tell you that is to let you know the history I know about Milwaukee. No matter where you go in the city and having such deep roots in the city, you tend to see where we all came from. And at the end of the day, we turn around and say, we all somehow migrated up to this area of the country. And so the way we ended up on the north side, the Hispanic community was pretty small back then, and all on the south side, which is where you have your densest population of Hispanics. And he went from picking mushrooms over in New Berlin, old farm that's no longer there on Moreland and Cleveland, to getting into construction, and that was a big deal. Yep. If anybody knows the history of Milwaukee, the blue-collar jobs and the living you can make off of a blue-collar job was a big deal. From Alice Chalmers to Miller to Pabst and the other Harnischweger and things like that. There was a lot of work, even building Marquette, and that's a lot. My dad went into construction, was able to afford a family of 10. I'll never say we grew up poor. Because he had enough to bring up a family of 10. And
you went to Tech High School?
Went to Tech High School.
And then you went to Carroll College. How'd you end up at Carroll?
Interesting story. Tech High School, and one of the things my dad preaches, first generation, and I think that comes from anybody who comes into America, is working hard. You use your back. So my dad wanted all of us to get a high school education and get a job to help out the family and help each other out. And I was going to be an auto mechanic, but I was able to get involved in sports, and that's where I really learned how important people are to the youth. And at Tech, there was some great leaders, some great teachers, some great coaches that I can't thank enough, because they're the reason why I went to Carroll. Initially, I said I was going to
encourage you?
It ain't more than encouragement. Yeah. More than encouragement. In athletics, we're doing pretty good at the time. Tech and I josh a lot of people that went to MPS, because even you going to Marshall, Tech was always the better in athletics.
Really?
Yes.
I don't remember it that way.
Yes.
But you played football, right?
Football and basketball.
Okay.
Football, we're the 1986 football team, the only city of Milwaukee MPS school to ever make it to the state championship. There's a lot of good people from that team, but again, they were built from the leadership. And the stories 30 years later still come back to people that train and mentor the group there. I can tell you stories. I think Mike Guerin and Frank Gimbel played a role in that 1986 team.
That's interesting.
So they bought the shoes for the team because we had we couldn't afford cleats or turf shoes. Yeah. So Frank Budish knew the two, reached out and anonymously they provided all of us with tennis shoes to play in the state championship team.
That's terrific.
It's amazing.
Great story.
Amazing, yes.
Great story. So you were going to be an auto mechanic, and then you went to college.
Yes.
So how did you end up a cop?
Well, sometimes I say, when you're young, and this is again, I owe it a lot to the people around here, and why I'm committed to Milwaukee is when you come from one, if you want to call it mentality, get a job. That's all I cared about. I didn't really know much about college. I did all my applications. Now the parents do all of that for their kids. I did all of that on my own, made a lot of mistakes along the way, but there was people there that helped me. And when I went to college, everybody was asking, what trade, what are you going to take, what are you going to major in? I can major in Spanish, but that was one. That's the easy one. I can do that, but I was actually intrigued about psychology, so I was taking psychology classes, and what's interesting is I didn't realize that the professors, the psychologists, were assessing me. I said, you don't want to do psychology, but here, try this. They actually talked me through, and as I realized, all the questions that they asked, they were assessing me. And by sophomore year, they said, you know what, you should probably consider criminal justice and give that a chance. You're too antsy. You don't want to sit in a desk, behind a desk. You don't want a assembly line job. You want every day to be unique. You want every day to be different. Try this. And I did. I gave it a shot. My senior year, I interned with the U.S. Marshals. And I had a great time. Got to do a lot with the U.S. Marshals that most interns don't get to do. They put me out on the field. Seek all the Spanish-speaking people they're looking for, knocking on doors, not realizing there's people with guns on the other side. But it was a lot of fun. Those guys that were there back then have recently retired. Doug Bockard was a U.S. Marshal. Wayne Ellinghausen, I still remember them. It's everywhere you go, they see something in a young person, and there's things that the people do to keep you motivated to keep moving forward, and things like that. They actually, again, motivated me. Keep going, apply, and for law enforcement, it takes you at least a year to get on, and that was the biggest mistake. I graduated, and that's how ignorant I was. 1992, I'm graduating from college. Oh, things are great. I'm interning with the Marshals. I'm going to get a job the day after I graduate. No.
Doesn't work like that.
Went back to minimum wage job and waiting list for every application I filed until a year and a half later I came out with the Milwaukee Police Department.
So when you became a Milwaukee police officer, what was your dad's reaction?
Very surprised, very, how should I say, proud. They never thought that and for my family, and they get angry when I say this, but it's not in the context. I'm the second youngest in the family, but the first one to graduate from college. The second youngest in the family, but the first one to get a job like this. And that's been quoted, and it says, well, they're all telling me, you think we're dumb? I have 8 sisters, and they make more money than their husbands. They're hardworking. The problem was they were older than I, so I was almost like I reaped the benefits from each and every sister that went in front of me. I had one sister that says, you might want to learn how to type, because you're going to learn, you need to know how to type. Just simple things like that that put me in a position better than they were. So yes, I was the first one to graduate from college. I was the first one to get a job like this, but it was also my elder sisters who put me in that, helped me get to that position.
So tell us a little bit about, because I think this will help inform our discussion about what you do today. Tell us a little bit about those first couple of years in the department. What did you learn? What were the things that jumped out at you that made you the cop you are today?
I was placed immediately, Spanish speaking, was placed in the South Side, and the South Side, the Hispanic community. What's unique is growing up in the city, especially in that area, I don't think there was a block that I couldn't go where I didn't recognize somebody.
Knew somebody, yeah.
Knew somebody. Even to some of the innuendos where we're driving with an FTO and a person whistles, and I'm like, did you just hear what they did? Like, what, he's whistling? Nah, he's calling us an MFer through the whistle. You know, things that, that cops would drive by not realizing what's going on in the neighborhood. When that said, I quickly found myself involved in more serious felony investigations simply because I could communicate in a language that most couldn't. So I'm a new cop, but I'm getting called to the Detective Bureau to do an interrogation on a sexual assault suspect. I'm a new cop, but I'm getting called to the Detective Bureau to interrogate somebody who just shot somebody. I'm getting called to a scene to interview people regarding a homicide, yet I'm a new cop. And I'm actually put in front of all of these things to do what veterans with 10 plus, 15 plus years.
So a ton of experience in a very short
Very short period of time, yes.
You know, I want to touch on something because, and this is not an easy topic to talk about, but you have seen and done a lot in your police career, and some people in this room know, and I'll bring it up, back in 2002, you were in a Milwaukee County courtroom. And in that courtroom, there was an individual who was being tried for murder, convicted of murder, and he tried to escape. I think his name was LaRon Ball. Tried to escape. Grabbed a weapon from one of the sheriff's deputies in the room, shot the sheriff deputy in the leg. You were in the room, you ended up having to pull your gun and use it, and you shot and killed this man. I've read accounts that said this changed you, and I can imagine that's true, but how would you describe how that changed you?
It changed a number of ways. The stories that I tell the young cops, and I had a long discussion with the team that worked with Mike Mahowski. They were hurting.
Who was recently killed in the line of duty.
Right. And the job will mature you. And as young as you are, even you get thrown to the fire, we're immature in a sense. It's just human. You're a 21-year-old person, 22, 23, you come on this job, and the things you see, the things you do. I will tell you this, and I'll try to try to compose myself, but the one thing that it has done to me is got me closer to God. And it's very quick that things happen.
Yep.
And with your family, it's a big deal.
They realize that being a police officer is sometimes a matter of life and death.
Yes.
It's brought home in, I would imagine, a very personal way to your family members.
Right. I've affected my wife more than anyone could imagine, and that's the one that bothers me.
It goes with being a cop, doesn't it? Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I want to talk to you about becoming chief, because you became chief earlier this year. And I know one of the things you said right off the bat is, I want to regain the trust, I want to rebuild the trust in our department. I want to rebuild that trust between community and police department.
Right.
Tell us why you said that. What did you mean by that?
Well, you have there's always good theories, and we're talking about some theories on policing before we came into the room today. And the theories, I don't want to badmouth any of the theories, but we're so quick to come up with technology, the data-driven, the cops on dots mentality, and they're not bad theories, but it's how you put them in your strategy. And in the strategies that we did, we started losing the focus of the officer that is in a neighborhood. And we talk about beats, but the importance of that beat where the officers know the people in that neighborhood and the people in that neighborhood know the officers. When we police and continue to use data in a fashion where if, I'll give you an example, the big thing in this last strategy was the Center Street corridor. Small, less than 2 mile area that accounts for, and don't quote me on the numbers, but 35–40% of the crime. If you reduce the crime in that area, you can then say crime is down citywide. But I think that's a false sense of stating that, because you put all your resources in there, and just an example, and I use it often. The number one car that is stolen is a Dodge Caravan, and that's an area where you have a high concentration of shootings and robberies. Let's stop the traffic that's going through there to reduce the crime. So we're going to stop the Dodge Caravan, but it also has the adverse effect, and that's why we got ourselves caught up in the ACLU lawsuit. Is now we're stopping this Dodge Caravan, and yes, maybe it has the broken or inoperable license plate lamp or some kind of defect that we legally can stop, but it's the couple that lives on Sherman and Center that works at Master Lock, and because we keep pushing our officers to enforce traffic laws in that area, that vehicle is going to get stopped every day, multiple times a day, and that may be a couple that supports the police, but once we keep doing that, they start losing the trust in us and realizing, again, the common thing, you're stopping the wrong person, you're getting, then I've seen people like that come to the Fire and Police Commission and say, stop racial profiling. We're not racial profiling, but we're forcing our officers to be in a dense area and just, do these random stops where we're not accomplishing much. And we angered people in that community in the Center Street corridor in areas that we did this, where it now had the adverse effect. I get what the theory was doing, but at the end of the day, for me, so we dropped that crime in that area, and even if it worked, if you drop that crime because it accounts for 40% of the overall city crime, what if I don't live in that neighborhood? What if I live on the far northwest side? And what if I'm hearing shots fired by my neighborhood? I want police services too. Right. But I can publicly say crime is down, but am I happy on the far northwest side of town or the far southwest side of town? And what about the level of accountability? And now when in the city, you don't have to be, you can be an employee of a city department, but you don't have to live in the city. We have to take the entire city. Every part of the city is important. And we have to find other ways to police there. So if we're going to police that Center Street corridor, because that is a high area of crime, we can't do it with police alone. We're going to need other organizations that are going to get involved in there, community groups, church groups that are invested in that neighborhood that are going to be there when we're not.
You've been doing a lot of that. You've intentionally set out to listen to community groups, yes. Make that a big part of your initial months on the job. You've talked a little bit about what you're hearing. What are they telling you that helps you respond to community concerns?
We haven't, the struggle is, and I'll be honest with you, there was relationship goals that I had coming on, and I'll get to the community groups because we're not there yet. Okay. So that's where I want to end it up. We're not there with where we want to be with community organizations. Relationships were broken. We had and I don't want to get to that point, but when you have different law enforcement agencies that focus internally and not really, and there's not collaboration with other partners, you tend to kind of close in, and those relationships start to struggle. And one of the things we do when crime is up is blame everyone else. But it's not my fault. It's the economy. It's not my fault. It's prosecution. It's not my fault. It's the jails. Right. It's not my fault. It's the budget. It's all kinds of things that you can blame it on. But at the end of the day, everybody is struggling with something right now. Let's work together and see what we can do holistically. So for me, it was important that I reestablish relationships with our system partners. It was important that we establish relationships with our intergovernmental partners at City Hall, more importantly. And it was important that I reestablish relationships with community organizations that walk the walk. And walking into the department and seeing all the different challenges that we had, we accomplished system partners, we accomplished the intergovernmental partners, but the community organizations are very tough because there's work that needs to be done there.
It's a process.
It's a process, and there's still that distrust. Oh. So there's things that happened in the last 6 months where people say, you lied to us. I don't lie to anybody. As a matter of fact, we were more transparent than anything. But there's challenges internally where, I'm finding out things after the fact, and it's tough to be transparent if people are going to criticize you on something that comes out new.
Chief, let's talk about trying to rebuild that trust and some of the challenges. You mentioned things that have happened in the last 6 months. So the high-profile Sterling Brown arrest, the player for the Milwaukee Bucks who's arrested, ends up being tased. You disciplined a number of officers. A number of officers have gone through retraining, and even, I think you're okay about talking about this, but even in the last 24 hours, you've taken disciplinary action on that. What has happened in the Sterling Brown case, which is in the subject of litigation right now, so I want to be, respectful of that, but what can you tell us about the latest developments in the Sterling Brown case?
Okay, I'll start off with one blanket part on the Sterling Brown. I told the public from the beginning that when we make a mistake, we're going to own it. And in that situation, we made mistakes, and we own those mistakes. That's different from civil litigation that our city attorney handles, and that's where I won't get into and explain. We have experience that we have, experience that we have to build within our department, and we have leadership that I want to find that helps our department overcome issues like that. And that is a process too. That is not going to happen overnight. But what bothered me about that is the poor leadership, and the most recent activities towards that, and you'll see it on the news. I didn't realize that media knew about it until I came in the building today and was attacked. Like, what is your response to firing one of the officers? Here's my reason for firing. And
this has happened in the last 24 hours.
This has happened in the last 24 hours.
One of the officers involved in the Sterling Brown arrest was fired.
And he was not involved in the initial part. It was more of the social media. And we have a social media policy. This policy did not just come out in the last couple of years. It's one that's been standing. In law enforcement, social media has adversely affected our private lives. And the policy is strict, is explicit on when your social media actions. What's important about that is you bring our department into your social media communication, you're going to have to answer for it. And I struggled with that. This is unfortunate. And what I mean by that is firing somebody is very serious from a profession such as this. It's going to affect you end up getting a job somewhere else. But at the same time, for me, one of the most important functions of a police officer is to be able to testify in court. And if you can't testify in court, that's one function, then I can't utilize you. I have over 100 officers that are inside limited duty at any given time with injuries. Why would I want a full-duty officer and pay full-duty wages if
so
they
you're
can't
saying
testify?
What was said in social media would cast a doubt on this officer's credibility if he were called to testify in a case?
Absolutely. And you can have a high-profile case happen anywhere in the city. And if I can't have that officer go on the stand, and that's where I used our partnership with the district attorney's office, we holistically came together to discuss the future. And one of those parts is, would you use this officer for testimony? And if we can't use him, now mind you, it's not a credibility issue saying that person lied, but at the end,
It was the tone.
it's the tone, and it'll be a circus by putting this person on the stand, and they're going to bring this incident out on, make a circus of the court every time this subject gets on the stand based on what was said. Kind of the way I kind of relate it to is the Mark Furman in Las Vegas during the O.J. Simpson case. It no longer came about the facts of the case.
It was about Mark Furman.
It was about Mark Furman. Mm-hmm. And what was the turnout of that case? Mm-hmm. And that's the point, we can't have that.
As you try to rebuild trust, how much did the Sterling Brown case set you back in terms of building community trust?
It set us back with the community organizations. We've come a long ways, and just look at what you see on the media. 25 years ago, you saw in L.A., what's his name, Rodney King, being beaten by a group of cops. And I don't want to say beaten, I don't want to get into the details, but he's being struck with a bat. Everybody knows that incident, and not to get into it, but that's a reflection on law enforcement. That's what I want to get at. That's a reflection on law enforcement. That type of scene, it's rare in law enforcement. It is. Now you see more tasing, and that's where we've used the tool to get us away from using that type of force. So we see more decentralizations out there, and it's not in the force that was back there. If I can say that, we've come a long ways, but we still can be better, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, that set us back, because even though this wasn't a pull out your bat and use that type of force, it's still one that shows that law enforcement has to, we got to get better.
I want to touch on some of the big challenges facing the department in a moment, but I did want to ask you one question about the composition of the department, because the force is about 36% people of color. It's largely still a white male department in a community that is now a majority minority community. That's been a challenge in recent years, changing the composition, having the force look a little bit more like the department. What can you do to address that? Does it make a difference in policing?
Well, that definitely is a challenge, but the numbers are, I'll clarify the numbers. Okay. During the late 90s, I also seen the transition of the police department, and I was hired in 93. From 1990 to 96 or 97, we had a huge hiring spike with the police department, and we did hire minority. We were focused on hiring minorities. We had a base going into 2000s of about 37% African American. The Hispanic population on the department has been consistent at around
18 or so? Or?
No, it's more like 12, 13%.
Oh, in the department.
In the department.
But 18% of the community.
Correct, correct. I'm talking on the department.
Yeah, okay.
On the department. With the 25 and out, what we've seen is a drop in retaining minorities on the job. So the African American group on the department went from 35+% to under 17%.
Wow.
So that's a big drop. The Hispanics have maintained at around roughly 12%. And then again, our Asian population on the job, when we're talking about, I don't know, maybe 1-2%, but that has been growing. So the one that's dropped on the department is African American. And the number now when we have with females, we're 7% on the department, female. And that's tough when, when you're trying to find, train and mentor. It's not right to promote a minority and just put them up on the executive level to say, this is what we're doing, but you want to train and mentor from the bottom. That's what was done with me, and that's what we want to do with others on the, on the department. But it's tough when when you have those struggles. Now you want to reflect that on the streets and specialty units, and it's hard to do that. So the famous BBC video that we all seen, that had a negative reflection on the department, because if you notice, it took place in an African-American neighborhood, and you had nothing but white officers. It just didn't look right. But no, the other story is that, where are your African-American officers? I want African-American officers throughout the department. But if I do that, it's not going to reflect in some of the neighborhoods that we have to.
So that is a point of emphasis.
It is a point of emphasis. Absolutely, absolutely.
Let's talk about a couple of the big issues facing the department today. The first one is one that I think probably everybody in this room is concerned about, and that's this reckless driving issue. You see people out on the streets ignoring red lights, driving at really high rates of speed. How are we doing in getting a handle on that? I know that has been a focus of some of your early activities as chief. How are we doing, and what's changed?
We're doing really good. Our crashes are down, and I mean the crashes in Milwaukee County. I just had a briefing by our robbery unit that the robbery crews, those type of carjackings are down. Currently, some of your carjackings that we're investigating are more either familial or drug-related, meaning it's a known actor and that type of carjacking. So our stranger-type robbery and carjackings that we had are dropping. The mobile drug market phenomenon is what was created with the reckless driving. And here's one thing that I will say, and this is the politics that get involved, is police have a job to do. And the politics can go from left to right. We still have a job to do. And one of our jobs is part of, you use these words, crime, fear, or disorder. And the disorder, if you're not doing your job and you're handling traffic or stopping vehicles because they're either reckless or they're involved, like I said, the mobile drug market phenomenon started because we chose not to pursue vehicles, or our standard was so strict,
right.
And that's what let me get back to that. Mm-hmm. Our standard was so strict that it prevented us from pursuing vehicles, that this is what was created. And I say that because there's things that we do that the public may not like. There's accidents that happen, but if we don't do our job, accidents are going to happen.
You're saying you have to pursue. You cannot have a policy that is so restrictive that people who commit flagrant, reckless driving violations are not pursued. You're saying we have to in order to establish order in the city.
Exactly. We can't. We have to do that. And either way it happens, either way you go with it, accidents are going to happen, so we have to.
I heard you at a news conference, Chief, back in August, I think, and you said that, and I don't know if you have the numbers now off the top of your head, but the increase in the number of police pursuits is astronomical compared to a year or two ago.
Right, and that's because people are still not realizing that that we're going to chase you. It takes a little.
No, you got to change people's behavior.
We have to change behavior, and it's going to take a little bit of time. But I am happy to see that the times are. I'm looking at the pursuit time. I'll give you an example. And being active as a law enforcement officer, pursuit or car chases were always there. But you could hear based on the broadcast, and we're pretty good at it. You can hear based on the broadcast what was going to happen. Cars would drive to a neighborhood that or the subjects fleeing from police would drive to a neighborhood that they're familiar with. They were going to drive to that neighborhood, they were going to bail out of the car and run, knowing they were going to try to hide in a house or somewhere that they were familiar with and get away. For me, okay, if you're going to flee, that's the much safer way. And the cops were good at it because the cops were now, okay, that car's going over to this neighborhood. They were already set up there, waiting for this person to bail out of the car. And that's why, we're good at taking them into custody. What happened by having a strict policy is it created this phenomenon where people were now involved in pursuits, or the fleeing vehicles thought it was more like a video game where these pursuits go on 15 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes. These pursuits back in the day, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, that's what you're looking at a pursuit. And now our 2-minute pursuit went into, half hour. That's a big deal.
There's a video out there that I saw where this young gentleman, I think he was a teenager, in a stolen car. I mean, literally, this went on for a long, long time where he just kept driving in a really crazy way through. Fortunately, it was nighttime. There were not a lot of people on the streets, but yeah, that's what you're talking about, that you're trying to end those pursuits much more quickly than in the past. The Chief Flynn always said when he was here, he'd always say, he said, we scaled back on the pursuits because I thought it was putting the public in danger, that we'd end up with these terrible crashes where people who were just innocent bystanders who were driving through an intersection end up getting hit and seriously injured or killed. What do you say to that argument, Chief?
I think I answered it by saying people are going to injure either way. And when we had this strict policy, people were getting injured as well. And I remember I was not too far from an accident. I was a captain at District 2, and this is my argument for this. We were looking for this 17-year-old kid who was involved in stealing cars on the south side. The officers had spotted him on a Friday off of 35th and Lapham or Mitchell, and he fled from the officers. We didn't have enough to pursue. The next day, he was in another stolen car on 84th and Morgan and ran into an elderly couple, killed both of them. That happened the very next day, and he was driving. We could have had him the day before. Could he have gotten in an accident because somebody had gotten hurt the day before? Absolutely. Yeah. But we're damned if we do, and we're damned if we don't. For me, we have a job to do. We swore to do a job, and that's what we're going to do.
So I'll talk a little bit about homicides, violent crime in the city. So back in the 2008, 2009, we were at the lowest numbers in homicides in the city in a long time. 70 homicides a year. And then we had a couple of years ago, Chief, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we had this spike. And then last year it was down again a little bit, actually fairly significantly from the year before. And this year we were, I think, trending down again. And then all of a sudden August happened. And we have just this spate, this more than a dozen murders in the month of August, probably closer to 20 in the month of August. What happened? Do we know, and how did you address it?
Okay. That's a long answer, and there's two numbers when you discuss homicides. You also got to bring in non-fatal shootings. You have to look at both of them to kind of give you a gauge of what's going on. And in the last 3 years, we're going on 4 years, you've seen the spike where we have high numbers of non-fatal shootings and high numbers of homicides. That's the concern. But if you look at what's going on in the city today, very similar to what's going on in the early 90s and late 80s, the crack epidemic was occurring back then. And that's when you had your high. 167 was, I think, 1992, but that was Jeffrey Dahmer played a role in that. Right. And before and after, you were up in around 140 homicides.
It was high for a while. Mm-hmm.
Yes. But that's what we're struggling with. We have a heroin epidemic that's going on, and we have and we had these high numbers. That said, if you go back to 2008, 9, where we had some big drops in homicide numbers, one of the things I like to say is, and I was a part of the team, is we had high homicide clearance rates and a high non-fatal shooting clearance rates. We were at 2008, 2007 or 8, I'm off a year, we were at 84 and we went up to 94% clearance rate in homicides. Our non-fatal shooting rates were high. And what's important is if there was a shooting that happened, we were taking that shooter identifying and taking that shooter into custody, oftentimes within 48 hours. That's huge. The level of accountability when a person fires a gun off in that fashion to be apprehended by police, psychologically, the impact it has in the neighborhood is strong, because if I'm going to shoot somebody and I know I'm going to get arrested and the neighborhood knows that, that's what you want, that's the message you want to send. We were doing that very well, and again, 2008, 9, 10, you saw that big drop, 11, and then it started spiking. We got rid of, we redid the entire detective bureau. We restructured it. We got rid of a unit that worked, an intelligence unit that worked with the detective bureau that addressed this. You often hear me say we're going to address the 10%. Those areas that handled that were removed. We got rid of our vice squad. We got rid of our intelligence unit. Some people call it a gang squad, but it's the group that works on your 10%. And we had maybe 4 or 5 people wanted on gun-related offenses like shootings or homicides, that low of a number. In these last 6 months, coming into June, we had a list of 40 people wanted for non-fatal shootings. That's a big number. Mm-hmm. And the message that this sends in the neighborhood is, I shot somebody yesterday and I'm still out on the street. That's the wrong message you want in these neighborhoods, in the public, that a person's going to use a firearm and shoot somebody and then let the public know that they got away with it. That's what we have to address. And,
are you going to reestablish some of those things that were done away with during your predecessor's tenure?
Yes, and with a different, with what we learned from what we were doing wrong as well. Our Special Investigations Division is a rebuild of our intelligence unit we had. One of the biggest arguments there is communication. So the group was, it took us a couple years to put it together. Started in '04. We weren't really operating well till '06 from the amount of training that it takes, the relationships and the connections you have with your prosecutors, both state and federal, to get a high prosecution rate, and then to start identifying the right people out on the streets. Because again, you don't want to focus on a neighborhood and stop everybody. You want to know who the problem is. That's what was functioning well. We have, well, in rebuilding that, what we did is we missed, again, last 10 years ago, the communication wasn't there with the rest of the department. We have a robust intelligence fusion center now that is the communication piece of all that intelligence. So we use our local, state, and federal information that comes from your HIDA. We use our information that comes from our Detective Bureau, our Special Investigations Division, along with the districts, and that has to get communicated. We're not foolproof, but we're a lot better in communication now than we were 10 years ago. And we have to get better at that information flow.
Two more quick things. Response time. Everybody wants police to be there immediately when something bad happens in their lives. And it can be small stuff and it can be big stuff. And you hear this, and I know that's something you want to work on. Mm-hmm. What can you do to achieve better response times? And frankly, do you have enough officers to make a difference in response times?
At the beginning, I will tell you this, in the position we are, and my argument with it is I would love to have more officers. I'm not going to be the one that says I can play that tune with one note. And the reason why I want more officers is to be able to minimize their geographical area responsibility, to have that communication with those neighborhoods. Okay. Good, better, and different. You're going to have the officer that isn't getting along, but the people are going to know the name of that officer, and that's huge. Not go by a badge number, but to know their name and to say, this is the person I have a problem with, good, better, and different. That is community-oriented policing, where it's to that level where we know each other by name. But you need the personnel to do that. And one example is from '99 throughout the early 2000s, we were staffed at 2,100 officers. Currently, we're at 1,830, and 130 of those are in the academy. You have, I told you, we range anywhere from 100 to 140 officers that are limited duty from injuries on the job. That brings us down to like 1,600 sworn, and to have those spread out. That's why when I looked at the Center Street corridor, we pulled that NTF and send those officers back to the district, because when you see 4 or 5 officers at roll call, how are we going to respond to assignments? And there's been some successes. Our motorcycle officers going back to the district to handle that time-consuming accident has allowed the officers to spend more time on the assignments. We're not where we want to be, but with the personnel we have, we're doing the best we can and looking at ways to get better. Now, we do have some technology issues with our new record management system that we went live with in May that coincides with our 911 system. We are having struggles. Those are challenges that are setting us back. But we hope as our IT gets better, it finally syncs, and we are able to get our personnel back up to speed. Now, I will tell you this, going back to the numbers, 1990, we had a big hiring spike. In 2005 is when people were eligible to retire. And where you're talking about last year alone, we had 260 officers retire. That's hard to maintain. Yeah. And it's hard to maintain. Every captain yesterday, their biggest challenge is staffing. So it is an issue, and that will, that's going to come down to our response times.
So my final questions are these. How will you define success, Chief, in the next few years? You've got a contract through 2020. How will you define success?
I said it yesterday, and it changes because you really don't know. I'm learning as I go as a chief. But seeing what I walked into, my goal is, if I leave in 2020, is to have a lot of these things fixed for the next person that takes over. If I stick around, I hope to be able to reap the benefits of fixing some of this stuff. But what I mean by fixing is not pushing blame, and I never want to say I want to push blame. But when you have come into a lawsuit, and we have to address it. Whatever chief is here has to address the lawsuit. When you have IT issues that are huge, I mean, when our 911 dispatchers are going to and from calls by writing it back on a card, we went back in time to give it to the other person. Those are some of the issues we're having. We have to fix that and be more efficient, and those, again, are things that we're working on. So if I'm not here, whoever takes over, I hope that those things are all done so we can actually work on our strategy and move forward and make the department better.
Here's my final question. This is a chance for you to say what's in your heart and what you know to be true about your department. What do people in this room, people in the community, not know about the Milwaukee Police Department, the officers who serve in the Milwaukee Police Department? We hear things that are not always the best, but you have a chance now to say, what do we not know about officers?
What you don't know about this is we have good people, good-hearted people in the Milwaukee Police Department. It's easy to see somebody, and like I said, when we make mistakes, it's easy to say we have a racist officer, we have, just a downright bad cop. But this job, and again, it goes to the Bible, walk in our shoes. You have people that took this job because they truly want to make a difference. And it's very difficult sometimes at how we're reflected when publicly we only see the negative side of policing.
So you're saying the officers are
great people, great people.
Let me take a few questions from the audience. We often do this. I'll call on you. The only thing I ask is that if you can keep your questions brief, we'll get to as many as possible. As we always say at these events, please no speeches, and we'll begin over here. Yes, sir.
I just want to know
also, let me, before you begin, if you have a question, please push down on those are microphones if you're in the seating bowl. If you're in the back and you have a question, Ryan has a microphone. He will hold it for you. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
how did Milwaukee become the hub of sex?
Go ahead. I'm sorry?
How did Milwaukee become the hub of sex?
How did Milwaukee become a hub for sex trafficking?
I don't want to push the blame on anything. It's where we push our focus. We struggle with our, and I don't want to put it all on us either. Human trafficking and prostitution, and if we can get into the definition of both, there's prostitutes that do it because they want to do it, or some of it's through drug addiction, and there's others that are recruited at the age of 12, and they get moved from one geographical location from a pimp to another to do these, and they're kind of more of a sex slave than anything, and those things are serious. I want to tell you my struggles in this, and I started learning more about prostitution in 2013 when I went to District 2 as a captain. It's extremely, extremely complicated. And what I mean by that is there's three parts of it. You have the pimp, you have the John, and you have the prostitute. The areas where you see that happen, you're going to see open-air drug markets. And what does that breed? It's going to breed street-level robberies, street-level shootings, and even street-level homicides. So these areas where you have the street-level part, and then there's also the hotels. I'll stick with the street-level part because it's bringing upon a lot of violence, is we did have at one time an area that our vice squad dealt with prostitution. There wasn't, it was an area that was able to maintain it. You're never going to stop it. I heard one person tell me when I was trying to address it that it's the oldest profession in the world. It's in the Bible. So why are you putting so much of an effort into it? But I said, well, so is homicide. If we're not going to care about prostitution, we might as well not care about homicide either, right? That's where we have our 10 Commandments. The thing is, you can't ignore it. And to some extent, some of the girls are victims, but to some extent, several of the girls are suspects. And it's complicated. The South Side had four homicides. 3 of those were prostitutes, and all of that was prostitution related. This summer we had a robbery spree One person, one person was killed, one person was shot in that robbery spree. The prostitute was luring in the Johns. We had one, those are south side ones. Now you have your, and I could tell you your locations, your north side, your 29th and Vine. And one prostitute murdered there last month. And the year before that, we had 2 or 3 prostitutes murdered in that same area within a 30-day period. It's a big deal. But what we haven't done is, and I've called in for meetings to collaborate. We have the Benedict Center, we have the Sister Center, we have our prosecutors, we have our law enforcement, we have the FBI. But I don't think we found the answer yet. We can address it. I know law enforcement, we're doing our prostitution sweeps. That's not going to bring down the numbers. That's what I can do in law enforcement. But I think we have to find a happy medium here, because you have these groups and you go from a strong enforcement prosecution side to their victims. Where do you go in between? And there's a ton of strategies in there. I don't have the answer yet. And I'm telling you, I've been really looking at this since 13, and I can't give you a solid answer. I can tell you it's extremely important. I know that I've had several aldermen address it with me, put it in complaints. We're doing our part, but I don't have the answer. Lastly with that, I want to add that in that prostitution issue, there is education and there's treatment and there's enforcement. And again, I don't think we're coordinated enough yet. But it is an issue. It's on our radar. We have to do better.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? Frank, go ahead. Then I'll go over here.
Congratulations, Chief. You have made a big difference, and you should be honored that you've been selected for this job. The community's behind you. But the second oldest profession are trial lawyers. And the trial lawyers would say, what can we do about the issue that we confront here and in so many other cities where unarmed people are shot in the back, are shot, appear to be innocently by police officers? How do we address this in our community to avoid a Dante Hamilton, to avoid the kinds of terrible things that have happened here? How do you address that as the chief to try to make sure that your officers are not going to be guilty of those kinds of violations?
Okay. Thank you. First, I'm going to reiterate your statement to see if I got your question correct. What do we do in addressing those incidents, critical incidents that I will call them, when an officer is involved in shooting another a person, and how do we address that publicly? We are in the process, and part of our transparency, everybody says, show the video. Well, we're in a process of coming up with a community briefing. And the way it is, we currently, and we're not there yet, but we want to come up with a way after every critical incident, within just let's throw 45 days, we want to be able to do a presentation, a video presentation that explains that incident. Now, there's a lot of factors that take into play. We don't investigate our own critical incidents anymore, so it might be one of the Milwaukee County law enforcement agencies or our nearby county or the state. So it's not our department that investigates it. That information, that evidence gets taken to the district attorney's office, to John Chisholm. They review it, but we can still provide a presentation whether he has made his decision on it or not, just explaining the facts and showing what we have, sometimes through body cam video or through just what was presented to us. And some of the things that we have to take into consideration is the family of who we shot. Are they okay with us showing this presentation? Is the district attorney, in each case is going to be different, but are they okay with us presenting the video? And then it falls down ultimately to me to decide if we're going to show this. But there has to be consistency. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it when the presentation may be bad or good. We have to be consistent in showing that. Our most recent one, and this is our test phase, is the recent shooting that we had on 10th and Burnham. We have a presentation set, but we are doing our due diligence and bringing everybody together to show the presentation. Through law enforcement partners, we've had their feedback. Now we have to get legal partners to get their feedback. We had one of the media stations, professionals, to show the editing. Is this, there's editing things that I don't know about, but they can tell us, yeah, you can't really show that on social media or TV, just to give us their professional opinion on the editing, and then we're going to move to certain groups to show them and get their opinion. Once we're done, I am pushing forward to doing this, and as we move forward, that is going to be huge. That's part of our transparency. A lot of times, the officer-involved shooting, it's what's said on the media outlets that creates a lot of the distrust. And if we can come out with something, again, good, bad, or indifferent, at least the public knows that we're out there showing, explaining what occurred and letting them know that at the end, it's still, most often in 45 days, I don't expect the DA's office to come up with a decision, but at least we presented some of the facts that are out there.
Let me see if I can squeeze in two final quick questions. We're there, and then we'll come down here. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
First of all, Chief Morales, I salute you for your accomplishments, and I also very much appreciate your demonstration of your humanity earlier in the interview. The CIA, the Secret Service, and the FBI, as a matter of departmental policy, utilize polygraph tests for internal investigations. Would you be in favor of instituting polygraph tests for your officers for internal investigations?
I haven't put much thought. You're talking about let me ask you this. The question is, would I use polygraph exams on internal investigations, or is that correct?
That's correct. You can't use them in court,
right.
But just internal investigations.
I'm going to go, and it's not a punt, but I'll go to say that I want to go with best practices. Part of and I'm going to move into our collaborative reform part. Collaborative reform addressed some of the issues we have with our internal affairs. So my focus in internal affairs is to get them all trained and uniformed in how we conduct business with internal investigations. Again, when I say if or eventually when I leave, because one day I'm going to leave from here, I can leave in internal affairs in a way where somebody doesn't come in and say, I'm the captain of internal affairs, I know how you do it, but we're going to change it for this one. No, we have to be consistent. A collaborative reform report identified some of those deficiencies, and we have to, and we're going to look at the best practices that we do nationally with the way we conduct internal investigations and establish that with the police department. So that is one of the building blocks that I have on the department, one of the things I want to address. The actual polygraph, if that's what the best practice is, then we're going to move with that. If that's not what the best practice is, then we're not. And I don't have that answer to tell you which way we're going to go.
We're just about out of time, but I want to squeeze in one more. Yeah.
Sure. So 2009, 2011, the United States government reporting on police officers showed Milwaukee was #2 for police brutality. And a lot of the settlements plus that led to the request for policies and practices to be reviewed. So moving forward, as far as police brutality is concerned, what are the strategies that you plan to implement to deal with police brutality, as far as will there be some financial penalties on law enforcement or on the officers who may be guilty of police brutality? Will they be required to begin taking out some form of insurance where they would be more responsible for police brutality, or what are you looking at as far as the strategies to deal with police brutality in that aspect?
Let's, in your question, I'm going to answer it in a fashion. You explain police brutality. We call it, when we're investigating it, is it excessive use of force? Okay? Because there's no thing in our writing in our books that say police brutality. Was the use of force excessive? And it's reported. and we have a policy and guidelines that go with the way we use force. Now, one thing that's important and the way we address it is we do have body cameras out there. Now, the level of accountability with our body cameras is important. Our Special Investigations Division, all right, which is going after the 10%, which is going to get involved in use of force incidents. What I thought and felt was important is the leadership in that division said, we want body cameras because people are not going to believe us when we're out there getting involved and going after the worst of the city. If there's areas that we're going to have, most frequent use of force, it's going to be with those teams. I was happy that they requested it instead of me offering them. And that's one of the things I'm proud to say about our police department. We're not scared to show the things we do. That's the group of people in that special investigations going back. That's where one of our officers was killed, Officer Mahowski. So I think what's important is we do have robust, we have use of force review teams that follow up on people, our members on our department that are using force. So you use a taser so many times, we have to review that. We have to see if we're finding patterns or something that are a concern to address them. And that's the reason why I bring up our Special Investigations Division is they're coming up on the radar because we do have systems in place to show who's using force on the radar for them. It's they are trained in using certain maneuvers to stop the vehicle that's fleeing. So they come up on our radar. What's good about that is we can review that and see what the volume of work that they're doing and make sure that we have those conversations so it doesn't get out of control and then we end up making mistakes. So we do have systems in place, and we do review that from the use of force review board and also a critical incident review board that reviews every critical incident, most often our officer-involved shootings. And we look at those where the officers acting within policy, where they're acting within training, was there adequate supervision, were there any equipment issues, and any other things that we need to address. And those are all done through our critical incident review board and our use of force review board.
I'm going to be respectful of everyone's time here because we're supposed to wrap it up at 1:15 and it's 1:18. So I'm going to wrap it up 3 minutes late. Let me say a couple things before I go. First of all, a few of you in the room have inquired about our next poll release, the Marquette Law School poll. That will be on Tuesday. Some of you have said, why aren't we getting more notice before the poll's release? And that's because the poll's not in the field yet. We go in the field before we announce we're going to have a poll release. So it's just the way we time these things out. So hope you can understand that. We're still interested in having you come on Tuesday if you want to be with us for the latest Marquette Law School poll. Secondly, I say this at just about every event we do, but I want to thank each and every one of you for coming today, for being here at the law school, for being a part of what I hope is a civil, thoughtful conversation. And to conclude, I want to thank the new Chief of Police in the city of Milwaukee, Alfonso Morales. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.